What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the same. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today's no different. I have Andria Santos of Fülhaus. That's spelled Fulhaus.com, not like the TV show. And Andria, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out of the podcast. And you know, there's been some interesting episodes over the year. Some of the fan favorites have been the co-founder of Pixar on, and he talked about how the company started. And he talked about some Steve Jobs stories, some George Lucas stories. So that was a fascinating one. Also, because we're going to talk about SaaS as well, with Andria's journey in the SaaS. We had some of the founders of Zapier in their journey. We had Pipedrive. I remember when I had them on, they had 10,000 customers. I think now they have over 100,000 customers. So they've grown quite a bit. And check those out. And Mailshake was an interesting one too, where he's grown to 70,000 users and he's been acquiring SaaS companies too. So check those out on InspiredInsider.com. And this episode is brought to you by Rise25. At Rise25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships. And how do we do that? We actually help companies launch and run their podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the accountability, the strategy, and the full execution. You know, Andrew, we call ourselves the magic elves that work in the background to make it look easy for the company and the host so they can run their business, develop amazing relationships, and create great content. You know, for me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships, and I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com. I'm excited to introduce Andria Santos. She's CEO and co-founder of Fülhaus. As I said, it's Fulhaus. It's an AI-powered interior design and furnishing company, and they're dedicated to improving performance of furnished real estate properties and hospitality businesses through great design. And her role as CEO, Andria, strives to transform the furnished real estate industry through technology. And that technology actually empowers the owners and the managers to design better. And so they have an enterprise done for you version, and they also have a AI powered tool that helps people do it as well. So Andria, thanks for joining me.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me here.
Start us off, talk about Fülhaus, and we can then talk about how it all got started, the inception.
Yeah, well, so exactly, you said it perfectly well. Fülhaus is an AI-powered furnishing and AI design platform, which just launched last year. So we're really excited about that. And we've been furnishing properties for real estate owners, managers, operators since 2015. So, you know, it really was about time that somebody created a little bit more innovation in this world, and we were really set out to do that. So here we are.
So how did Fülhaus get started?
Yeah, so 2015, I had originally had a career in law, and I had worked at Air Canada in their legal department, and then went into a private real estate firm in Montreal. And, you know, there was a lot of Airbnb hype obviously happening around that time. So we had this, my co-founder and I kind of started this e-com site. It was vintage designer furniture online. We started came up with the branding, Fülhaus. The .com was available, and sure enough, we got picked up by what was Flatbook at the time, is now Sonder. And from there, it really just kind of, caught wind, snowballed, opening across Canada and the US. And we've been servicing the furnished rental industry ever since. So we really focus on either multifamily, single family rentals, helping properties ultimately perform better through good design.
Early on with the e-commerce site, what would be an example, like something's on the site and the company went and purchased something? What did that look like early on?
Oh man, that was like the best time. That was driving around in a U-Haul, picking up vintage furniture from, what I like to call the heyday of Montreal, which is where I'm from. And Montreal was lucky to have both the 76 Olympics and Expo 67, which allowed it to really be this kind of epicenter of design and that mid-century modern aesthetic. So there's a lot of that kind of lurking in various places around the country and the province. So really just kind of focusing on those design heroes of the time. We built Fülhaus, which is based on actually Buckminster Fuller and Bauhaus. So that's where the Fülhaus comes together. And it was a great time. We're literally squatting in one of the properties that I was, managing, and just revamping, refinishing furniture, and just kind of getting a lot of people involved. And it was really early days for ecom too.
How were you finding? Were you just going on estate sales and then going and picking the stuff up and bringing it back? What did that look like?
Yeah, literally. Yeah, that's literally it. Going to estate sales and flea markets. And luckily, my co-founder, who's really the design mind behind everything, had a really good eye for designer product, right? So, finding those Eames loungers and a lot of those, those quintessentially beautiful product from the heyday of that time. So it was cool to source and find and collect and revamp and bring back to life until, of course, we saw scale, and then the whole world changed.
So the first version, is pretty labor intensive, where you're going around, you're picking it up, you're bringing it back, you have to maybe restore it a little bit, and then you have to sell it. How are you getting people to your site?
It wasn't so hard at the time because Instagram was really early days, right? So you make a little bit of noise on some social media and some people, show up. I remember we had this really fun warehouse, this garage that we collected all this stuff in, and we didn't think anybody would show up. And we came, we had this little garage sale, and we, opened the door. We arrive at our studio, and there was a lineup outside. And we were just kind of like, whoa, how did this get around so far? And within hours, everything was gone, and it was just, it really just picked up steam really quickly. But yeah, to your point, it is really difficult to do all of that labor intensive work and get it all really, up to speed. So we had to pivot a little bit away from vintage, sadly, as much as I really do love it. But it's just too hard to actually scale vintage right now.
We'll talk about the pivot points a little bit. And, so it sounds like early on, you were getting this kind of antique furniture and you use social media to really drive demand. Yep. And then what was the next pivot point from, and that's also, it's time intensive, it's capital intensive too, because anyone in e-commerce, you have to buy the stuff typically, unless you're doing drop shipping, and then sell it. So what was the pivot point then from there?
Yeah, so we got a couple of really, large volume contracts, and people just wanted more. They loved what we were doing. They wanted more of it. So, and again, you can imagine at this time, 2016, 17, everybody's just buying up units and, occupying spaces, whether it's, leasing it long-term to sublease it short-term. It was that time where there was just so much drive in the market to pick up a lot of this sort of Airbnb coattails, right? Riding those Airbnb coattails. So there was a ton of demand for this type of quick install, quickly turnkey furnished property that could get up and running as quickly as possible. So that's when, the vintage labor intensity could not really withstand what the demand was asking of us. And it was interesting because, we really didn't know what to do, right? Like, how do we then procure our stuff and still maintain a certain amount of margin that's going to keep us alive, right? And so we had to pivot, and we got a friendly tip from somebody to go check out one of the furniture markets. And they're like, just go, you'll understand it, just go, and it's in High Point, North Carolina. And once we got there, that's when it really opened up our eyes to the wholesale vendor approach to, this kind of business. And we're always on a mission to do this kind of packaged furniture product where you can, get this well-designed turnkey product, which is the hardest thing to really achieve. Is you can buy furniture anywhere, but how do you do it with good design quickly? That's really the hardest thing to achieve. That's been kind of the mission ever since, is offer turnkey packaged homes, furniture, and do it with good design.
So the first iteration was people are just getting it, the furniture from you and then placing it themselves. The next is you're getting demand and they may want you to furnish like a whole house or apartment or something like that. What did you figure out from that point? Were they asking you, because at that point, I don't know if they're just only asking for furniture. It sounds like they weren't sure what they should do. How did you then price the service? Now you're doing a service and the product, right? At this point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was the scale was coming in more like we want 30 units a month, 50 units a month, 70. And it just kind of, that volume of buying just had to be done through different channels, right? So pricing is always tricky. I think anyone will tell you that, right? In furniture, it's kind of, we learned later on that there's a lot of benchmark pricing to just kind of, work with, given the, how old this industry is. There's a lot of benchmark pricing out there. But, including the service, including the logistics, including, all of the very many pieces that we're just starting to understand and trying to appropriately price. Obviously, we didn't do so well in the beginning and have since improved upon. But yeah, it's interesting to see, and I think a lot of the market has changed in its learnings around, what is the stuff cost? Inflation has greatly changed the cost of products today. So it took us a while to learn, but you got to test and you test into it and you figure it out.
At that point, I'm just curious, were they taking pictures of their house and you were making recommendations, or did they kind of knew what they wanted and you were helping order for certain rooms?
Interesting. So the way that I say it is that everybody comes to you with two pieces of information, a floor plan and a dream, right? So they have this idea of what they absolutely want, and they have a floor plan. So that's really what we get. And now we have to interpret that floor plan, interpret that dream, and provide them something that they can afford, right? And that's usually the hardest part. Sourcing and procuring and trying to maintain that idea of that dream alive, right? While you're also being filtered through budget and timelines and availability and stock levels and all that stuff. So that's where, the wheels started turning into, this is a data problem, right? This is a data aggregation problem, right? So we need to know inventory, stock levels, and images of the product, right? And there's so much of it out there, right? There's no lack of furniture in the world. So if we could figure out how to bring all of this data and centralize it and standardize it, then we can figure out how to sort it and get us our answers faster. So that was what we set out to do then.
We'll get there, because the kind of where you wanted to scratch your own itch and build a tool to make it faster, easier, and also give people what they want, from a service perspective. What was a major milestone for you in the company as far as clients or customers go?
Oh man, major one. I mean, Sonder was great, and they were a great client to have. But one of the major ones for us, which unfortunately didn't materialize, was Airbnb. We'd kicked off a pilot program with them early 2020. So sure enough, by the time we were rolling it out, and they were getting such demand as well for like help to refurnish properties, right? So help us get up list and optimize our properties, right? So they were seeking a service that could help them help their users, right? So that's where we came in. And so we started a pilot project with them just in San Diego. And the volume that came in just with that small, pilot was more than even we could handle. And unfortunately, it was March 2020. So soon after the world shut down and that kind of ended. But that was a really exciting time, and which really shed some light on the fact that this was kind of a problem that people were finding everywhere. So, yeah.
I'm surprised, I like your philosophy on there's a lot of people who are just renting or they're moving to Airbnb and they don't want to buy their own furniture. I'd rather show up, it's there, and I pay, extra amount per month. And, the owner probably makes a bit of money off of that rental, and the person doesn't have to buy all new furniture, then figure out what to do with it when they want to move in 6 months or a year. So, have you found that over the years the mentality has changed, or not really?
Absolutely. The interesting thing is whose mentality has changed. So, yeah, the tenant is definitely in that space. In fact, I just shared it on LinkedIn a few days ago. Court Furniture recently shared a survey on 70% of tenants that they had interviewed had wanted to move into or would consider moving into a furnished rental as their next property versus 40% the year before. Right. So like that is a huge increase over 1 year for the amount of people that are actually looking for a furnished rental. Right. So, and it's not just in the short-term rental world or, flex living, as they're saying now. It's really like long-term tenants, it's coming to be that if I don't own this real estate, why do I have to lug around all this furniture? Right. It makes absolutely no sense. So that whole like built to rent world, which is, has really been commonplace in Europe for a long time. People have been renting furnished rentals for a long time because it makes no sense to move sofas around London, right? So we're starting to see that mentality migrate over here as well. And we're seeing, I mean, I myself live in a lot of places and I couldn't imagine having to furnish that. And I own a furniture company, right? So it's just, I just see a lot of, generational change in that mentality. The problem is it actually changing the mentality of the owners of the properties, right? So to invest that extra amount into the property to furnish it for a few extra dollars, right? Is that shift really happening amongst owners and operators, owners specifically, because they're generally the ones that have to, invest in the property that way? Mildly. There's interest. There's definitely, we're seeing a lot of operators and property managers who do understand the benefits of renting furnished, really kind of egging them on in that direction. So you are seeing some shifts where they team up with operators that are then going to manage this property. Yes, we're seeing those owners and those managers come together to kind of nudge them in that direction. But, we attend a lot of conferences, we talk to a lot of owners, and it's still very tough for some of the large real estate owners to imagine why they would invest that additional cost, and also to have it easy for them to do, which is where we want to come in, right? We want to just make it really easy for you to like understand what the cost is, see your return. If there's management of this product, it'll be easy to deal with. That's kind of the goal. Yeah.
At what point do you decide we really need to create something to make it easier, and that looks like an AI SaaS tool?
Yeah. So it came to be when we're having so many of these discussions with, clients where it's, show me your dream, show me your floor plan, continue. And it was, again, 2020. So we had just raised our first round of financing and, ton of people and a ton of time on our hands. So, we kind of put our heads down and we're like, okay, if we're going to do this at the scale that Airbnb just showed us we can do this and the demand that there actually is, then we really have to build the tool that will get us there the fastest, right? And that will accelerate and scale that type of demand. So we started to look at how does the funnel currently work, right? How does that client come in and what are the expectations and et cetera. So we ultimately realized that to get the client from when they enter the funnel into an order, right, to do that, we have to always have this designer handhold them through every piece of the puzzle, which is like, what do you really want? And what is, and all of those very many filters that I identified earlier. So we ended up asking, realizing that a very poor way to have that communication with a client is language. So language is a really bad thing to use when you're talking about design. And I'm not saying that there's not a design language to be had or design communication to be had or conversation. It's more so that when a customer comes to us and they tell us, okay, I want modern, what does that mean? Right? And what is their interpretation of modern or contemporary or mid-century? So, we realize that if we can understand what they mean by their image and by that dream, and we can interpret that, then we know exactly what to procure for them. Right? So exactly as you're seeing right here, you come right in, you upload that inspiration image. So that dream that you have, you upload that there, and you can select a room or a unit. And there you go. So if you select a unit, you've got all the zoom controls in the way, which room you ultimately want to start with. And boom, Ludwig presents you a furniture package comprised of everything you need for your units. So you have your living room, bedroom, and dining room. And it's based on your image inspiration that you have uploaded in advance. So then you go in here and you actually filter everything. You can see stock levels, you can swap items. So you don't like the sofa, you'll get Ludwig recommendations and also see all product in the library. You can filter by budget, by size, by availability. And I mean, the best thing about it is it just allows you to do all of that fun little design tooling that's, ultimately necessary to visualize how it all comes together. You can add your backgrounds. So you have assets you can upload and do background, and you can add your doggo as well.
It's a must. Right
Yeah.
there, the dog. That's
And
great.
finally, what's great is you see it all come together in this really simple item list, and you can see what's available, and check out in one place. And you don't have to manage multiple orders, multiple arrivals, multiple, products coming from different suppliers. So you can imagine this is really easy to use in a single unit format, but when you're doing 100, and you've got 100 units and you have 100 sofas or 30 different ones, and one needs replacing, or, there's changes to be made, properties change, and things happen. So when you're in that world and it's such a big expense, you really do want to come back somewhere and manage all of this and be able to scale that cost and those assets.
Talk about, up to that point, you're bootstrapped, right? What made you decide to say, okay, we need to raise our own capital for this?
Yeah, it's funny because, we started this company with $600. That was the first spend at our first auction, right? So just like $600 and a website. So then we started to raise, I guess after in 2019, we did our first million in sales. And so we started to raise at that point. And it really was to kind of, we know that the demand is there. Now we just kind of need to scale it. And it required this tool to help us kind of get access to everything immediately in this, format. So that's really when things kicked off.
Yeah, I mean, it's a capital intensive industry in general. Now you're talking about developing a SaaS tool, which is, can be complicated. How did you go about now, you go from being in the legal field and you have shipping experience to furniture, now SaaS, right? So who are some of the resources you use to start to get this project across the finish line?
So we are based out of Canada, which is a huge benefit for most companies that are developing technology of any kind. So we really had a ton of support from various institutions out here, from grants to, other types of lending and financing. But it takes convincing, right? And it took a lot of legwork, really convincing these people that we're going to go from this furniture provider to the SaaS company, and this is what we need to do it. And, technology had AI was just kind of becoming a thing at that point, right? So it was very much the time when we started to see AI being able to identify, certain X-ray images and certain, things across the medical field. One of the big ones that you may know is the, Chihuahua muffin comparison. I don't know if you've seen that graphic where it's like, is it a Chihuahua or is it a blueberry muffin? So
I haven't seen that.
yeah, so like there's a lot of like, AI kind of working on imaging technology, which was really important to what we wanted to achieve. We wanted to go from image to multiple pieces of furniture that make up that same style, right? So that was kind of just starting, and we really were testing into it, and luckily we got some help to work with the Computer Research Institute of Canada. Of Montreal, to help us understand, like, is this technically feasible? Hypothetically, is this doable? And so they were kind of, seeing that, yes, it was. So at that point, we got some funding to be able to hire, the necessary machine learning and developers that we needed.
Take me to the evolution of the team a little bit. Obviously, early on, it's just two of you, it sounds like. How did that evolve over time?
Oh man, it's the fun thing about being in a garage is that people walk by a lot, especially when you have the doors open. And that's how we acquired our first staff. Not necessarily always the case, but a lot of times, people had heard about us and they kind of just walk up and they're like, I have these tools and I have these skills and like, can I help? And it was just kind of like, it was at that point that I started to understand, the value of employees and how they can actually help you scale your business a lot faster. But there was a time when, of course, we're hard pressed and we're bootstrapped. And we had this giant studio, it was like the first thing we signed was a 5-year lease when we made our first 50K, right? So we have this huge garage studio and we have bills to pay. And so we're like, okay, what do? We need money, blah, blah, blah. It's not easy to find this and that. And we're like, you know what we actually need? We actually need people. And what we have is space. So let's offer the space for free in exchange for help on the company. And that's exactly what we did. We started offering, free co-working, and you'd contribute time. So what happened was we turned this giant warehouse into a co-working space of some kind with all of our vintage furniture and neon lights and like pinball machines. One of our first people was a website designer. So he then designed our website. Another guy was a pinball mechanic, and that's where the pinball machines came from. And so he did all of our installation and ops. We had other people come in from different walks of life that would just assist in this product. And then, it was incredible because everybody had this kind of common goal outside of just, you're a freelancer, you're working on a client project, and everybody was kind of like working together also part-time, which really created this amazing community. And yeah, it was a great space.
And then what about on the development side? How many team did it take for you to get that off the ground and also maintain it?
Yeah. So we started with our first developers. We went to the universities and went to their kind of, career days. We hired 2 developers, which then, they're like, okay, we need a machine learning guy and we need this person and we need that person. And we're learning our way through this entire thing. Yeah, my family is quite technological as well. So my brother works in software and my father is has a few patents as well. So I've also been kind of exposed to that reality of understanding what our needs are, and just kind of in that entrepreneurial spirit, you kind of just get it done and find the people to do it.
Andrea, looking back, what do you wish you would have known now that you've gone on this kind of SaaS journey in the beginning when you first started?
How expensive it is. I think that of course, we went through crazy changes, but we could have never expected, I think, what we've seen over the past few years. We've been developing this, like I said, since about 2020. So, a lot, you can only plan so much, obviously, right? But I think when we had set out to endeavor to do this, I don't think we thought that it would take 3 years and X number of dollars to invest in this idea, which has proven to be incredibly fruitful. But I think that planning would have hard to plan, but ultimately would have been really interesting to have known in advance.
I mean, there's obviously a lot of changes, and the only way to do that is for you to use it and other people to use it. What were some of the key things that you implemented into the software because of maybe it's your team's feedback or an external feedback?
Remove background. So one of the really annoying things that I think a lot of designers will understand is that whenever you're creating your vision or mood board or whatever you want to say to present to a client, you have to remove white backgrounds of all the products, right? So that was definitely something that they were like, if you could just solve that one thing in one place, just that would really help. So that's a fun one that a lot of people, when they see it, they're like, that is just such an annoying thing that everybody has to always step outside of their tool to figure out and fix. So that was fun. And there's a lot of things. Ultimately, this was built based on an industry that we already understood really well. So it wasn't like let's make up SaaS, let's make up a tool that we think might work. It was that no, we actually had tested this, and we know that this is a huge improvement on the current state of affairs.
What about little features like, when I showed by the way, if people are listening to the audio, there was a video version and we were, actually walking through a demo. And what's kind of cool about that is, if you were watching it, I'll bring it up again for a second. It's this, and I've not seen that on other sites before, so it's pretty cool. But there's a little red dot that actually, from a user experience, is pretty cool. Right. And so this little dot kind of follows you around and like actually brings you. I mean, I've seen like there's maybe a next button, but not quite like this. So I don't know if this was like a major conversation or how you came to this user experience, I guess you could say.
So funny story, but let's give credit to where it's due. So that is actually Storylane, which is this demo creator tool. And they actually create this demo for you so you can walk people through an example of your entire software. So so this is actually created in Storylane. So very great UI, definitely. But this is kind of the demo version. So when you actually get out of here and you actually do log into your own platform and your own dashboard, that's when you really start creating.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Bringing it back to what you were saying before, I kind of pulled this up. So you were referring to Chihuahua or Muffin. So talk about what you were explaining here related to AI.
Yeah. So, so the question is, this was a time when, does AI know the difference between a Chihuahua or a Muffin? Right. So this was one of the examples of those images. And so this had only started developing around that time, really, so I don't even know, 2017. Yeah, this was all kind of coming to fruition and people talking about like, okay, AI can tell between these images. What else can it tell? Right. So It was all so exploratory at the time, and then it was funny because when we launched last year, it's like every AI tool came out last year, right? In 2023. So it was just like, has everybody just kind of been heads down working on this in the background for the past 3 years? And I guess the answer was yes, right? So it was interesting to see that. Yeah.
I didn't realize the actual resemblance between a Chihuahua and a blueberry muffin until you just showed me that. Talk about Unos for a second. So like just, to go back, there is an enterprise version where you can use a tool, but like you guys basically handle all of the back end stuff. And then there's the tool people can just use on their own. And that may be for property managers or interior designers that they may use for their clients as well. Was there a thought of, well, I'm not saying you're creating competitors, but why even release it to the public? You could just use it internally and streamline it and help clients with it. You decide to actually make a front-facing version. So maybe talk about the decision to to do that as opposed to just keeping it as an internal tool?
Yeah, I think what's fun is the community that comes together around a technology that's new and innovative and that is actually useful as well, you know? So I think it's beyond only what Fülhaus can do with it, right? And I do have that kind of philosophy about you do have to kind of keep certain things available to the masses and available to other people to use them. If you're going to create something new and innovative, you might as well see other users and their use cases for it. Um, so yeah, so there's logic in, you know, not keeping it to ourselves as well. And we're very niche at the same time, right? So Fülhaus is very much focused on servicing, you know, the B2B side of real estate, right? The business, the real estate investor and developer. There's some amazing consumer sites out there, right? That could really, you know, see value in this. And I do think that would be we've dabbled in consumer and it's not my cup of tea. So I would much rather put this tool in other consumer site hands and see what they can do with it.
So, you know, one use case would be Uno's. So talk about what you did with Uno's. I mean, I'm in Chicago, so I'm very familiar with Uno's and other, you know, deep dish pizza places, but
Yeah.
talk about Uno's.
Yeah, so they came to us because they're launching kind of a new angle as well for their brand, and they wanted something that was kind of new and, you know, one design forward. So they kind of wanted a brand redesign and an interior redesign for their brand. And then, okay, cool that you can do all of this new interior design and branding, but then how do you actually roll it out amongst your franchisees? Right? Is it just some booklet with an order form that they have to kind of somehow piece together? You know, so there's no real tool that can help with that. Right. So in that real kind of procurement world, especially with franchises, you'll see the same thing in hotels. Right. So you'll have kind of the HQ and the central headquarters of that hotel chain or of that, you know, franchise, really making all of the design decisions, but no way to properly disseminate that across their franchisees. There are other sort of e-procurement tools, but they're not really designed forward. So they don't actually help you visualize exactly what you're buying and needing. So that was kind of where they came to us and they were like, well, this is great. You know, you have the full service design agency and then a place where people can actually purchase this stuff and check out. So it just became a really easy rollout tool for their new chapter of their business.
Yeah, so on that side, like a lot of B2B could be a franchise. I know there's short-term rental, hotels, and other channels there. And then when you were exploring who would be the best customers for the actual self-service tool, I know we talked about interior design and property management firms. How do property management firms use it?
So similarly, right? So property management firms also come to, onboard owners and who have properties who need or have furniture and will always need redesigning at some point in that life cycle. So having a place where they can see all of the very many properties that they have, what they've ordered and purchased, and also to know what needs replacement, because you do need to know if that nightstand is broken or if that lamp is broken, what room is it in and what does that room look like, right? So, and if I'm replacing that, it has to match the other one or it has to look a certain way and it has to overall, keep it together versus just letting, the time of procurement chip away at something. And it's such a big investment, right? What these hospitality brands do spend on this cost, right, of furnishing is huge, and it's the one thing that really determines where they stand in that ranking of quality. So is it low end, is it mid, or is it high? It's largely dependent on good design. So the question is, how do we make it more attainable for some of the mid-tier folks?
Andrea, first of all, thanks for sharing the journey from a garage until now, the AI SaaS tool. Probably at that time you weren't thinking we're going to have an AI SaaS tool someday, helping large organizations and hotels and franchises. But my last question, and people can check it out, what they have going on at fülhaus.com. It's FULHAUS.com to learn more. My last question is, through this journey, we all have mentors, and some of the lessons that we learn from our mentors. So I love to hear a few of those. I know you come from a family of entrepreneurs, so maybe a lesson that you learned from, sounds like your dad had some patents and a business as well. So maybe start with him and
Yeah.
any other mentors that have helped you along the way and a lesson you learned.
Yeah, I think my mentors are very personal to people I know personally, right? So I find it really hard to kind of hold people too highly if you don't personally know them. There's a lot of other things going on behind the scenes and it's never a full story, right? So yeah, to that point, my dad is a huge inspiration for me. I saw him build his business from, our basement and into multiple offices around multiple countries. And it was very inspiring to me at the time. And I saw the ups and downs of that side of things, right? Of being an entrepreneur. So, it's huge to be able to see it live and be a part of it. And like the conversations around the dinner table are so interesting from a young age, right? When you're talking about shipping and cargo and, international and iron ore going from, South America to China, and why, and what are they building? Why do they need so much cement? And you really understand the global economics of the world, right? And why things are happening. Crazy inspirational, right? So definitely one of the ones I hold highest. But
Do
another
you
one.
think, Andrea, before you get to the next one,
Mhm.
obviously you're around it.
Yeah.
Um, did you always have that inkling that you were going to be an entrepreneur, or because like you said, you saw the ups and the downs, so that could be like, yeah, I'm going to definitely do this, or there's no way I'm ever going to do this. What was your thought when you were, growing up? Did you
Mhm.
have any thought on, no, there's no way, this is too up and down, or no, this is for me?
It was, I mean, it was so exciting to see, the seeing it all kind of happen in front of you and really going from nothing. Like I tell you, my parents built their own house, their first house with their own hands, right? So, um, but, and turning that into, multinational, it's super exciting to see. And you really understand life at a different scale. And, understanding the value of freedom also and not being tied to that desk job, right? And like I was going down the path of being a lawyer. So that was a very, very serious desk job. So that's not something that I could really, it wasn't a pill I could swallow very easily. And then, when I was in real estate and I had a $10 million check that I was bringing to a notary in my hands. And I was like, I will never have my name on this if I keep working this desk job. So that was it for me. I was like, something's going to give, and it gave. And here we are.
So your dad was a big inspiration. You were going to mention someone else who's a mentor.
Yeah. So the person whose name was on that check was the other person, which was my boss at the time, later became an investor as well. Real estate, second generation real estate owner and developer. And it was, where we're similar in age. So it was also interesting to see him take over his father's business and really become that, and take it to new levels as well. So also to become uh, his own CEO and business owner, and get a lot of inspiration of the right and wrong things to do from that angle.
Any specific lessons from them that you took either observing or through conversation?
I feel like there's so many. There are so many. Um, oh man. There's one that I always say that my dad would tell me as a kid, and this is going to sound horrible, but it really added value to my life, and I tell you why. When I used to say I want something, and he would be like, "Ask me if I care," and it was such a harsh reality to look to that person and look at your dad and be like, "Do you care?" And he'd be like, no. And that was the end of the conversation. There was really nothing more to be said.
So was he saying go after and get it yourself? What was the?
Yeah. He's like, you're going to have to find another way around this. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well, Andrea, I just want to be the first one to thank you. Everyone can check out fülhaus.com, more episodes of the podcast, and everyone will see you next time. Thanks, Andrea.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeremy. Take care.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like 100 grand.